Late October in Baltimore carried a different kind of cold. It was not the soft chill of early fall. It was sharp. It slid through coats and scarves and settled deep in the bones. That Thursday night, the wind rushed through Madison Wharf Avenue like it had somewhere urgent to be. Temperance Whitlock hurried along the sidewalk with her collar pulled high. She was 25 years old, but the weight she carried made her feel older. 3 months earlier she had buried her mother. What remained after the funeral was silence, unpaid hospital bills and letters stamped in red ink. She worked double shifts now. She counted coins before buying groceries. Sleep was a luxury she rarely allowed herself. The glowing sign of the Onyx Crown shimmered ahead of her. The building stood tall and polished, with dark glass and gold trim. It did not look like a restaurant. It looked like a fortress dressed in velvet and money. She pushed through the heavy oak service doors and stepped into warmth and noise. Cutting it close again, Whitlock, Gerald Pike snapped before she could remove her coat. Gerald was the floor manager. His hair was slicked flat with too much gel. His suit was tight around his belly. His smile never reached his eyes. The bus stalled, Temperance said quickly. I ran the rest. You better run faster tonight, Gerald muttered. VIP balcony is booked out. Entire level. No mistakes. She tied her apron tightly around her waist. What kind of party? She asked quietly. The kind where you don't ask questions, Gerald replied. Private. Powerful. Dangerous. Keep glasses full. Speak only when spoken to. Temperance nodded. She had learned not to argue. The Onyx Crown hosted people who did not like being looked at too long. By 8 o'clock the energy in the room shifted. Conversations lowered. Waiters moved more carefully. Even the musicians softened their playing. Then they entered. 6 men in tailored suits stepped inside as one unit. Their eyes scanned exits. Their hands rested near their jackets. They moved like they had rehearsed this walk. In the center of them stood Alessandro De Luca. He was taller than most men in the room. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly. His face was sharp, controlled, unreadable. There was a quiet force around him, like a storm that did not need thunder. But what stopped Temperance was not the man himself. It was the 2 small children with him. On his left side, holding his hand tightly, walked a boy in a small navy blazer. On his right arm, resting sleepily against his shoulder, was a little girl. 6 years old maybe. Twins. The sight did not match the rumors she had heard about Alessandro De Luca. Rumors did not include bedtime or small shoes or sleepy faces. Balcony is ready, Gerald hissed. Whitlock, you're serving. Her heart beat faster as she lifted a tray of crystal glasses and climbed the spiral staircase. 2 large security men blocked the entrance to the private balcony. One of them checked her apron and tray before allowing her inside. The balcony felt different from the main floor. Quieter. Tighter. Controlled. Alessandro sat at the head of a long mahogany table. The twins were seated beside him. His men stood along the walls facing outward. This was not dinner. It was protection. Temperance approached carefully and poured sparkling water into Alessandro's glass. He did not look at her. His attention remained on a phone in his hand. Daddy, the boy whispered suddenly. I dropped turbo. The small red superhero figure had slipped from his fingers and rolled under the table, stopping near Temperance's shoe. 2 guards immediately stiffened. Temperance did not hesitate. She set her tray aside and knelt. She picked up the toy gently and brushed invisible dust from its cape. He looks like he took a fall, she said softly, handing it back to the boy. But heroes always stand up again. The boy smiled. Alessandro turned his head slowly. For the first time he looked directly at her. His eyes were cold gray but not empty. They studied her face, her tired eyes, her frayed cuffs. What is your name? He asked. Temperance, sir, she replied. He held her gaze for a moment longer. Then he nodded once. Bring pasta for the children. Plain. Butter only. She moved quickly to the kitchen. Behind the restaurant, a black van pulled into the alley. Inside the kitchen, Walter Briggs, the new porter, wiped his hands on his apron and glanced toward the back service door. After a brief pause, he unlocked it. Temperance did not see any of that. She focused on the bowls of pasta in front of her. Butter only. A little extra cheese on the side. When she returned to the balcony, the little girl was awake, coloring on a napkin. The boy swung his legs under the table. She placed the bowls carefully in front of them. As she stepped back, something caught her eye. In the mirrored bar behind Alessandro's seat, she saw movement near the service entrance. A waiter stepped inside. But something was wrong. The uniform did not fit him properly. His sleeves were slightly too long. His walk was too stiff. and in his hand, held low near his thigh, was a matte black pistol fitted with a suppressor. He was not aiming at Alessandro. He was aiming at the gap between the chairs. He was aiming at the boy. Everything slowed. Temperance felt her body move before her mind could form a full thought. "No!" she screamed. The sound ripped through the balcony. She lunged forward. Two soft pops echoed, dull and flat. The first bullet struck her shoulder. It felt like being hit with a hammer wrapped in fire. The second tore into her side. She crashed into the table, shattering glass and plates, then fell across the twins, wrapping her body over theirs. "Get down," she gasped. Chaos exploded. Alessandro moved instantly. He flipped the heavy table on its side, creating a barrier. His men drew weapons. Bruno Falcone, the head of security, tackled the shooter before a third shot could be fired. Gunfire erupted as security eliminated the threat. The twins were crying beneath Temperance's weight. Alessandro pulled her carefully to the side, checking his children first. "Matteo. Lucia. We're okay," the boy cried. They were covered in pasta and trembling, but unharmed. Alessandro turned to Temperance. Her white shirt was soaked red. Blood spread across the fabric quickly. "Why?" he demanded, pressing his hand against her wound to stop the bleeding. She blinked slowly, fighting to stay awake. "Are they okay?" she whispered. "They are safe," he said firmly. She gave a weak nod. The world around her grew dim. "Forget the ambulance," Alessandro barked at Bruno. "Bring the SUV. Now." Bruno ran. Alessandro lifted Temperance into his arms. She felt light, too light. Her head rested against his chest. He carried her down the back staircase into the cold night air. Rain had begun to fall. The armored SUV screeched to a stop beside them. Alessandro climbed into the back seat, still holding her. "Drive," he ordered. "Drive now." The vehicle sped into the darkness. Inside, Temperance's breathing grew shallow. "Stay with me," Alessandro said, gripping her hand. Her fingers loosened. Her head tilted slightly to the side. Then everything went quiet. Alessandro stared down at the blood covering his hands. His children were alive. Because of her. He looked out the rain-streaked window at the city lights of Baltimore. Someone had tried to break him by targeting his son. Someone inside had allowed it to happen. His jaw tightened. "I will find them," he muttered quietly. "And when I do, I will burn this city down." The SUV disappeared into the cold October night. And behind them, the Onyx Crown stood silent, its polished floors still wet with blood. Pain came first. It was not sharp anymore. It was heavy, deep, and steady, like a weight pressing down on Temperance Whitlock's body. Somewhere close, a machine beeped slowly in a calm rhythm. That sound was the only thing that made her understand one truth. She was alive. Her eyelids felt thick. When she forced them open, the room above her was dim and quiet. The ceiling was high, decorated with dark wood beams and a small chandelier that gave off a soft golden glow. This was not a hospital. Hospitals had harsh lights and crowded rooms. This place smelled like clean sheets, polished wood, and expensive cologne. She tried to sit up. A sudden tearing ache ripped through her side and she let out a rough gasp. Her hand flew toward her ribs, but thick bandages stopped her. The pain made her vision blur. "Don't move." The voice was calm but commanding. It did not ask. It ordered. Temperance turned her head carefully. A man stepped forward from the shadow near the window. He wore a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair was neat. His eyes were cold, watchful, sharp. Alessandro De Luca. Temperance's memory crashed into her at once. Mirrors, the gun, the twins, the table flipping, blood, rain. She swallowed hard. Her throat was dry like sandpaper. "Where?" she whispered. "Where am I?" Before Alessandro could answer, another man moved into her view. Shorter. Balding. Wearing glasses. A stethoscope hung around his neck like he belonged in a real clinic. "She's awake," the doctor said. Temperance blinked slowly, trying to focus on him. "Who are you?" she asked, voice weak. "Dr. Emiliano Russo," the man replied. "You were lucky. And stubborn." He stepped closer, glancing down at the monitor beside her bed. "The bullet in your shoulder went through clean," Dr. Russo continued. "It passed without tearing anything vital. But the one in your side was messy. It nicked your liver. I had to stitch it carefully." Temperance's breath caught. "My liver?" she repeated faintly. "Yes," Dr. Russo said. "You lost a lot of blood. If they had taken you to a public hospital, you might not have made it. Not because I'm not good." His tone was dry. "Because someone would have finished the job." Temperance tried to speak again, but the room tilted. Her body still felt drugged, slow, heavy. Alessandro stepped closer. He looked at her like he was studying a problem he could not solve. "Why did you do it?" he asked. Temperance frowned. "Do what?" His jaw tightened slightly. "You threw yourself in front of my children," he said. "You took bullets meant for them." The words hit her. A wave of anger rose through the pain. "Because there was a gun pointed at a child," she snapped, then immediately winced at the sharp tug in her side. "What kind of question is that?" Alessandro did not blink. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "It matters," he said. "Because you were in the right place at the right time. You moved faster than my security. A professional got into my VIP section dressed as staff. That does not happen by accident." Temperance stared at him, confused and offended at the same time. "You think I planned to get shot?" she said, voice shaking with disbelief. "You think I wanted this?" Alessandro's eyes stayed hard. "People have done worse for money," he replied. "People have done worse to get close to me." Temperance's lips parted in a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Pain flared. She clenched her teeth and tasted something metallic in the back of her throat. "I don't even know your enemies," she said when she could breathe again. "I don't know what a Conti syndicate is. I don't know who you are beyond the fact that you walked into a restaurant with an army." Alessandro's gaze sharpened. "You've never heard of the Conti syndicate?" he asked. "No," she answered. "And I don't care. I saw a gun. I saw a kid. I moved." For a moment, the room was silent except for the beeping machine. Dr. Russo cleared his throat and stepped between them. "That's enough," the doctor said firmly. "She needs sleep, not an interrogation. If she pops a stitch, I'm not fixing her again tonight. And you," he looked at Alessandro, "you look like you haven't rested in days." Alessandro's eyes narrowed slightly, but he backed away from the bed. Temperance took a slow breath. Then she remembered something and panic rushed in. "The kids," she said, trying to lift her head. "Matteo and Lucia, are they?" "They are sleeping," Alessandro said. "They are safe." Temperance's chest loosened, but only slightly. "I want to go home," she whispered. Alessandro's face stayed serious. "You can't," he said. Temperance stared at him. "What do you mean I can't?" she demanded weakly. "You are a witness," Alessandro replied. "The man who shot you is dead. The man who paid him is not. If you walk outside, you'll be dead within an hour." Her mouth went dry. She wanted to argue, but her body felt too heavy. The drugs pulled at her like a tide. The last thing she saw was Alessandro turning toward the door, his voice colder than the room. "Rest," he ordered. "We will talk again." The door shut. A lock clicked. The next 3 days blurred together. Temperance floated in and out of sleep. Sometimes she woke to pain, sometimes to thirst. Sometimes to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Once, she dreamed her mother was sitting beside her bed, humming softly. When she opened her eyes, it was only a lamp and silence. On the 4th morning she woke properly. The rain had stopped. Pale sunlight pressed through heavy curtains. Her side still hurt, but the burning agony was dull now. She shifted carefully against the pillows and managed to sit up a little without screaming. A knock came. Before she could answer, the door opened. A huge man entered, thick-necked, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had survived too many fights. His nose was crooked. His eyes were steady. Bruno Falcone. He carried a tray with toast, fruit, and coffee. He set it down beside her with surprising care. "Boss says eat," he grunted. "I'm not hungry," Temperance replied, though her stomach betrayed her with a small rumble. Bruno stared at her. "Boss says eat," he repeated like it was law. She slowly picked up a piece of toast, mostly because arguing felt pointless. Bruno reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. He tossed it onto the bed near her legs. "What's that?" she asked. "Your life," Bruno said. "Boss told me dig deep." Temperance hesitated, then opened it with trembling fingers. Her breath caught. There were copies of her birth certificate. School transcripts. A photo of her mother's death certificate dated 3 months ago. Overdue notices. Eviction warning. Bank statement showing a balance that made her feel ashamed. Then she saw it. A police report from 5 years earlier. Arthur Whitlock deceased. Ruled suicide. Temperance's hands began to shake. "My dad," she whispered. Bruno watched her carefully. "Baker," he said. "Had a small shop. Took a loan to expand. Couldn't pay. 2 weeks later he jumps off a bridge." Temperance slammed the folder shut. "Get out," she snapped, her voice raw. Bruno didn't move. Loan Shark's name was Carlo Iron Hand Ricci, he continued. Low-level enforcer. I said get out. Temperance yelled, throwing the folder at him. Papers scattered across the floor like snow. Bruno barely flinched. Ricci worked for the Conti syndicate, he said. Not us. Temperance froze. Her chest rose and fell quickly. It's all the same, she spat. Suits, guns, power. You ruin people and call it business. You done? Bruno asked. No, she hissed. You're all monsters. The door opened behind him. Temperance looked up. Alessandro De Luca stood there, dressed in a navy suit as if he was heading to a boardroom instead of a mansion full of armed men. His face was unreadable, but his eyes caught the scattered papers on the floor. Bruno glanced at him, then bent down and began gathering the documents quietly. She's clean, Bruno said to Alessandro. She hates us, but she's clean. Alessandro didn't speak at first. He stepped inside and waited until Bruno left. Then he looked at Temperance. I'm sorry about your father, he said. It wasn't soft comfort. It was an acknowledgement. The fact said out loud. Don't pretend you care, Temperance replied, turning her face toward the window. I saved your kids because they're innocent. Not because I like you. As soon as I can walk, she added, I'm leaving. You can't, Alessandro said simply. Temperance laughed once, bitterly. I didn't ask for this, she said. No, he agreed. But you chose it when you jumped. Temperance's jaw tightened. I don't want your money, she said. I'm not offering money, Alessandro replied. I'm offering protection. Before Temperance could respond, small footsteps ran down the hallway. Daddy? You said she was awake. The door burst open and Matteo and Lucia rushed in. They stopped at the foot of the bed, staring at Temperance with wide, curious eyes. Matteo stepped forward, holding the red superhero toy against his chest. I brought Turbo, he whispered, placing it carefully beside her hand. He helps people heal. Lucia moved closer and touched Temperance's fingers gently. Does it hurt? She asked softly. Temperance's throat tightened. Her anger did not disappear, but it softened. Only a little, she whispered. Turbo is helping. Alessandro stood quietly behind them, watching. His face stayed controlled, but something in his eyes shifted. Something like confusion mixed with gratitude. After a moment, he guided the children back toward the door. Let her rest, he said gently. You can come back tomorrow. Can we? Matteo asked. Alessandro glanced at Temperance. He was asking permission. Temperance nodded slowly. Yes, she said. You can come back. The children left. Silence returned. Temperance exhaled, then looked back at Alessandro, her voice turning hard again. If I stay here, she said, I have conditions. Alessandro lifted an eyebrow. I'm not your prisoner, she said. And I'm not your servant. Name them, he replied. I want to earn my keep, she said. A real job. And I want access to a phone. Alessandro nodded once. Done, he said. But you stay inside the gates until I find the leak. Temperance frowned. The leak, she repeated. Alessandro's face darkened. Someone told that shooter where I would be, he said. Someone told them details that never left my inner circle. He turned toward the window, his voice low and deadly. Someone close to me betrayed me. He looked back at Temperance. And right now, he said, you are the only person in this house I know for sure isn't trying to kill me. Temperance stared at him, heart pounding. She was not free. But she was alive. And she had just stepped into a war she never asked for. Winter did not arrive in one dramatic moment. It crept in quietly like a thief. The mornings at De Luca Manor grew sharper. The sky stayed gray longer. The wind carried a warning in it. Temperance Whitlock was still healing, but her strength was returning in small, stubborn steps. She could walk without swaying now. She could breathe without feeling like her ribs were made of glass. The scar on her shoulder itched under the bandage, and her side still pulled when she moved too fast, but she refused to act fragile. She had conditions. Alessandro had accepted them. So now, instead of staying trapped in a bedroom like a patient, she spent her days in the quietest place in the estate. The library. It was a huge room lined with dark shelves. Books that looked untouched sat beside framed photographs and old awards. A heavy oak desk stood near the window, and the window looked out over wide lawns and tall fences guarded by men with guns. Temperance sat at that desk with a laptop, a stack of printed financial sheets, and a pen she kept tapping against her thumb whenever her mind raced. She was not here to pretend she belonged. She was here to work. Alessandro had dropped the ledgers on her desk days earlier. He had said only one thing. Find the fat. Temperance understood exactly what he meant. In her old life, her father had counted every bag of flour twice. Her mother had stretched meals to last. Temperance knew how money leaked when people thought no one was paying attention. She knew how thieves hid in small numbers, not big ones. Big numbers attracted questions. Small ones slid through unnoticed. Hour after hour, she studied invoices from Alessandro's legitimate businesses. Construction, shipping, waste management, logistics. The names looked clean. The numbers did not. That night, the manor was quiet. The twins were asleep. The guards outside moved like shadows. Temperance sat alone in the library, shoulders tense, eyes stinging from staring at rows and rows of figures. Then she saw it. A line item in a waterfront project budget. Steel supply. The company was paying for grade A steel at grade A prices. But the shipping invoices, those were different. Temperance leaned closer, comparing the weight listed in transport records with the expected weight of higher-grade steel. The figures didn't match. Not even close. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed a calculator, checked again and then again, making sure her eyes were not betraying her. Grade C steel weighed differently. The invoices matched grade C. Someone was charging Alessandro for the best and delivering the cheap version. Temperance sat back slowly, breath caught in her chest. That was not a mistake. That was theft. She did the math carefully, piece by piece, taking her time. The difference wasn't small. It was massive. About $40,000 a month. Her hand tightened around the pen. She highlighted the entries, pulled up linked documents, and traced the transport company name. It was connected to someone inside the DeLuca web. She whispered the number to herself, like saying it would make it less real. 40,000. A sound came from the doorway. You're still awake. Temperance jumped so hard her chair creaked. She turned quickly, heart hammering. Alessandro stood in the doorway, a dark coat draped over one arm. He looked like he had just returned from the city. His hair was slightly damp at the edges, and he smelled faintly of cold air, smoke, and expensive liquor. Temperance pressed a hand to her chest. You don't knock, she said sharply. Alessandro's mouth twitched as if he found the reaction amusing, but he didn't fully smile. This is my house, he said simply. Temperance exhaled, forcing herself to calm down. I found something, she said, turning the laptop toward him. Alessandro walked in slowly, like a predator entering a room, and stopped behind her chair. The warmth of him was close enough that she could feel it. His presence was heavy. Not loud. Just unavoidable. What is it? He asked. Temperance pointed at the screen. In the waterfront project, she said. You're paying for grade A steel. But the transport invoices match grade C weight. Someone is swapping materials and skimming the difference. Alessandro leaned in, his hand resting on the back of her chair. His knuckles were near her shoulder, close enough to make her tense again for a different reason. His eyes moved across the numbers quickly. His jaw tightened. That transport company is run by a cousin, he muttered. Temperance looked up at him. Then your cousin is robbing you, she said flatly. Alessandro let out a low sound, almost like a chuckle but without humor. Idiot, he said under his breath, not sure if he meant the cousin or himself for trusting him. Then he looked down at Temperance, something different in his gaze. You have a good eye, he said. Ms. Whitlock. Temperance shrugged slightly, pretending it didn't matter. I hate thieves, she replied. Alessandro's attention stayed on her face. Rich or poor? He asked. Either, she said. A thief is a thief. Alessandro moved away from the chair and walked to a small side table where a crystal decanter sat. He poured 2 drinks into heavy glasses without asking if she wanted one. He handed one to her. Temperance stared at it. I'm working, she said. So am I, he replied. She hesitated, then accepted the glass. The liquid smelled warm and sharp. Alessandro took a sip of his drink and leaned back against the edge of the desk, one leg slightly bent, looking too relaxed for a man who lived like war could break out at any moment. Temperance took a cautious sip. It burned going down, but it also warmed her stomach in a way she hadn't felt in weeks. You look tired, Alessandro said. I'm fine, she answered. I wasn't talking about your stitches, he said. Temperance froze slightly, then set her glass down more carefully. Alessandro watched her, quiet. The silence stretched. It should have been uncomfortable, but instead it felt loaded. Then he spoke again, and the topic changed in a way that caught her off guard. Matteo asked me something today, Alessandro said, voice calmer now. He asked if you were going to be his new mother. Temperance choked on the air in her throat. What? She spluttered, eyes wide. Alessandro's expression stayed serious, but there was a strange softness behind it. He's a child, Temperance said quickly. He doesn't understand. He's just attached because of what happened. Is he wrong? Alessandro asked quietly. Temperance stared at him, shocked by the question. That's not fair, she said after a moment, voice lower. Their mother is gone. Alessandro looked away, gaze drifting toward the window. She was beautiful, he said, tone flat. But she loved the lifestyle more than the life. She loved being Mrs. DeLuca. She didn't love the danger. She didn't love the messy parts. Temperance's chest tightened slightly. She didn't know what to say to that. Alessandro took another sip of his drink, then spoke again, softer now. You didn't run, he said. Most people run. Temperance swallowed. I did what anyone would do, she replied. Alessandro's eyes returned to her. No, he said. Most people save themselves first. He stepped closer. Temperance felt her whole body tense as he reached out, his thumb brushing lightly along her jawline. The touch was slow, controlled, and it sent a strange electric shock through her. It wasn't romantic in a sweet way. It was dangerous. It made her want to lean in and pull away at the same time. Alessandro, she whispered, voice unsteady. For a second the air between them felt too thick to breathe. Then the door opened. Temperance jerked back like she'd been burned. A man entered the library wearing a polished suit and a calm smile that never touched his eyes. Vittorio Caruso. He paused, gaze flicking between Temperance and Alessandro, taking in the closeness, the drinks, the tension. Am I interrupting? Vittorio asked smoothly. Alessandro straightened, his face shifting back into cold control. Temperance found a leak in the transport division, Alessandro said, voice businesslike. Vittorio walked toward the desk and glanced at the laptop screen. Did she? He said, sounding impressed. Clever girl. Temperance met his eyes. Something about Vittorio unsettled her. His politeness felt thin. His gaze felt like it slid over her like oil. We need to talk about the Children's Trust Gala, Vittorio said, turning to Alessandro. Alessandro let out a quiet sigh. The gala? He muttered. A room full of smiling sharks. It's necessary, Vittorio insisted. Rumors are spreading. People think you're shaken from the balcony shooting. You need to show your face. You need to look untouchable. Alessandro's expression hardened. And you think a charity event will fix that? Vittorio tilted his head, then looked at Temperance. Not just the event, he said. You should take her. Temperance blinked. What? Alessandro's eyes narrowed. Vittorio continued calmly, like he was explaining something obvious. The mystery woman, he said. The angel everyone is whispering about. If you bring her on your arm, it shows you've claimed her. It shows you're in control. It shows you're not afraid. Alessandro looked displeased. It's dangerous, he said. I'll have security on every corner, Vittorio replied. She'll be safer there than she is here alone. Temperance felt the weight of their attention settle on her. Alessandro looked at her directly. It's your choice, he said. Temperance hesitated. She didn't trust Vittorio. Something in her stomach tightened whenever he spoke. But she also didn't want to be left behind in a house full of secrets and armed men while Alessandro walked into a room of enemies. I'll go, she said finally. Vittorio's smile widened slightly. Excellent, he said smoothly. I'll handle the details. He turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. Temperance watched him, unable to shake the feeling that he was pleased for the wrong reasons. Once he was gone, Alessandro stared at the closed door for a long moment. Temperance spoke quietly. You don't like this, she said. No, Alessandro replied. Then why agree, she asked. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Because perception is reality, he said. And because I have enemies watching my every move. Alessandro didn't answer. Downstairs, far away from the library, Vittorio walked through a quiet hallway and slipped into a room where no guards stood. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number that was not saved. When the call connected, his voice dropped to a whisper. She's alive, Vittorio said. A distorted voice crackled back, unreadable. Vittorio's mouth tightened. The plan failed, he continued. But he's distracted now. He's softer. He listened, nodding slowly. Then his eyes turned cold. Yes, he said. I understand. His voice lowered even more, sharp and sure. New plan, Vittorio whispered. We kill them both. He ended the call. For a moment he stared at the dark screen of his phone. Then he slid it into his pocket and walked away like nothing had happened. Upstairs, in the library, Temperance sat back down at the desk, trying to calm the strange tension in her chest. She didn't know it yet. But she had just agreed to step into a trap dressed as Charity. And the man smiling politely in the hallway had already decided she would not survive it. The Bella Rosa Grand Hotel stood like a palace in the center of Baltimore, glowing under winter lights. Marble steps led up to tall golden doors. Valets moved quickly. Black cars lined the curb like polished shadows. Inside, the annual Children's Trust Gala was already in full motion. Temperance Whitlock stood in front of a full-length mirror inside a private suite upstairs. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The red velvet gown hugged her frame, rich and dramatic. It fell smoothly to the floor and shimmered under the lights. The neckline rested just low enough to reveal the faint scar near her collarbone. Her hair was pinned loosely, soft curls framing her face. Around her neck sat a diamond necklace. It looked simple. Elegant. It was not simple. Alessandro De Luca stepped behind her, fastening the clasp carefully. His fingers brushed lightly against her skin. "There's a tracker inside the stone," he said quietly. "If we get separated, press it." Temperance looked at his reflection in the mirror. "You really think that's going to happen?" she asked. "In my world," he replied, "anything can happen." He stepped back and studied her. "You look dangerous," he added. Temperance raised an eyebrow. "I'm wearing heels." "That makes you more dangerous," he answered. He adjusted his tuxedo jacket and met her eyes again. "Stay at my side," he instructed. "Smile. Speak carefully. Trust no one." She nodded. "I know how to work a room," she said. "I was a waitress." "These guests bite harder than customers," he warned. They took the private elevator down to the ballroom. The doors opened. The noise lowered instantly. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. The ballroom was gold and crystal. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the ceiling. Music floated gently from a string quartet near the stage. Women in silk gowns and men in tailored suits filled the floor. But when Alessandro walked in with Temperance on his arm, the room shifted. Whispers moved like wind. "That's her. The waitress. The one who took the bullets. The angel of the Onyx." Temperance kept her posture steady. Her hand rested lightly on Alessandro's arm. She could feel the tension in him, controlled but present. He moved through the room with confidence, greeting businessmen, judges, politicians. He introduced her simply. "Temperance." No explanation. No details. It drove curiosity wild. An hour passed. She accepted champagne but barely drank it. She answered polite questions without revealing anything important. She smiled when needed. She listened carefully. Bruno Falcone stood near the bar, watching the room like a silent guard tower. Then Vittorio Caruso approached, face serious. "Alessandro," he said quietly. "The Pittsburgh Circle representative is demanding a private meeting. Penthouse level. Now." Alessandro's eyes sharpened. "Now," he repeated. "He says he has information about the shooting at the restaurant," Vittorio added. "He claims he knows who brokered it." Temperance felt Alessandro's grip tighten slightly on her arm. "Go," she said softly. "I'll stay with Bruno." Alessandro scanned the room, then nodded once. 5 minutes, he told Vittorio. Then he turned to Temperance. "Do not leave the ballroom," he ordered. "I won't," she replied. He disappeared into the crowd with Vittorio. Temperance exhaled slowly and moved toward the bar to stand closer to Bruno. Before she reached him, a waiter stumbled into her path. A tray of drinks tipped. Champagne spilled down the front of her dress. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," the waiter stammered loudly, drawing attention. Temperance stepped back instinctively to avoid the mess. A group of laughing guests shifted between her and Bruno. By the time the crowd cleared, Bruno was gone. Her heart skipped. She scanned the room quickly. Then she felt a hand grip her elbow. "Don't press the necklace," a calm voice whispered near her ear. Temperance turned. An older man with silver hair and a scar through his eyebrow stood beside her. His grip was firm. Behind him, Vittorio appeared. His polite smile was gone. "Where is Alessandro?" Temperance demanded. "Chasing ghosts," Vittorio said smoothly. "There is no meeting." Temperance's stomach dropped. "Why?" she asked. Vittorio leaned closer. "Because Alessandro has grown soft," he said. "He allowed emotion into his decisions. He allowed you into his house." The silver-haired man tightened his grip. "Don Massimo Bellini sends his regards," Vittorio added quietly. Temperance's eyes widened. "You're betraying him," she whispered. "He is weak," Vittorio replied. "The family needs strength." He nodded toward the hallway. "Take her," he ordered. The silver-haired man pressed something hard against her ribs. A gun. They guided her quickly toward the kitchen service doors. The music in the ballroom covered the movement. No one noticed the woman in red being led away. They passed through swinging doors into the busy kitchen. Chefs shouted. Pans clattered. Quiet, the gunman muttered. Or I shoot you here. They reached the loading dock. Cold air rushed over her bare shoulders. A black van waited with its engine running. Get in, Vittorio said. Temperance looked at the van. Then she looked at Vittorio. You're going to blame Pittsburgh, she said. Vittorio gave a small smile. Yes, he replied. Alessandro will rage. He will go to war. And in the chaos he will fall. Temperance's heart pounded. The gun pressed harder into her ribs. Move, the gunman growled. She moved. But not into the van. She pivoted sharply, driving the pointed heel of her stiletto down onto the gunman's foot with all her strength. He shouted in pain. His grip loosened. Temperance grabbed a large metal pot from a nearby cart and hurled its contents forward. Boiling stock splashed across the gunman and Vittorio. They screamed. The gun fired. The shot hit the ceiling, not her. She ran. Back through the kitchen. Through shouting chefs. Through swinging doors. Help, she screamed. Gun. She burst into the ballroom. Music stopped instantly. Hundreds of faces turned. At the top of the staircase, Alessandro De Luca had just returned from the empty penthouse. His eyes found her immediately. Her dress was torn at the hem. Her hair was loose. Panic filled her face. Behind her, Vittorio and the silver-haired gunman stormed into the ballroom with weapons raised. Get down? Alessandro roared. The first shot shattered a chandelier. Crystal rained down. Guests screamed and dropped to the floor. Temperance threw herself down as gunfire erupted. Alessandro moved fast. He vaulted over a railing, landing on the marble floor below. He grabbed a heavy silver steak knife from a fallen table as he rolled. Bruno appeared from the side, blood trickling from his forehead. He charged the gunman and tackled him to the ground. Gunfire echoed through the room. Vittorio stood facing Alessandro now, pistol in hand. It should have been me. Vittorio shouted. I built this empire while you mourned. Alessandro walked toward him slowly. You betrayed my children, he said coldly. Vittorio fired. The bullet grazed Alessandro's arm. He did not stop. Vittorio fired again. Click. The gun jammed. His face changed from rage to panic. Alessandro reached him in seconds. He dropped the knife. He grabbed Vittorio by the lapels and slammed him into a marble pillar. I made you family, Alessandro said quietly. Family is weakness, Vittorio spat. Alessandro struck him once across the temple. Vittorio collapsed unconscious. The ballroom fell silent except for distant sirens. Police were coming. Alessandro turned. Temperance was pushing herself up from the floor. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. Bruno limped over, dragging the injured gunman. Cops 2 minutes out, he said. Alessandro nodded. He lifted Temperance into his arms. Let's go, he ordered. They exited through a private corridor before the authorities reached the main entrance. Outside, the cold night swallowed the chaos behind them. As the car door closed and the engine roared to life, Temperance looked back once at the glowing hotel. The gala had been a trap. And the traitor had finally shown his face. The escape from the Bella Rosa Grand Hotel felt like moving through a tunnel of noise and flashing lights. Sirens screamed outside. Guests ran in every direction. Glass and champagne soaked the marble floor. But inside Alessandro De Luca's vehicle, there was only heavy breathing and the sound of tires cutting through wet streets. Temperance sat in the back seat with her arms wrapped around herself. Her red dress was torn, stained, and ruined. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't stop them. Not from cold. From what almost happened. Alessandro sat beside her, silent, his jaw tight. A thin line of blood ran down his forearm where the bullet had grazed him. He did not look at it. He did not care. His eyes stayed forward. Bruno Falcone sat in the front seat, pressing a cloth against the cut on his head. His breathing was rough, but his posture stayed alert. Even in pain he looked ready for war. No one spoke until the car passed the gates of De Luca Manor. The iron gates slid open. Armed guards recognized the vehicle and waved them in quickly. The car rolled down the long driveway toward the main house, passing bare winter trees and dark windows. Temperance stared at the place, realizing something slowly. This was not just a home. It was a fortress. When the vehicle stopped, Alessandro opened his door first. He stepped out, then moved around to Temperance's side. He offered his hand. Temperance didn't want to be carried again. She forced herself to stand even though her knees felt weak. She took his hand and stepped out onto the cold stone ground. As soon as her shoes touched the driveway, she heard it. The sound of shouting inside the house. It was not panic. It was anger. Alessandro turned toward the entrance and walked in like a storm. Temperance followed slowly. Bruno stayed close behind her like a wall. Inside the manor, the air was tense. Men stood in the hallway, all of them armed, all of them watching. Some looked shocked. Some looked afraid. In the center of the group, on his knees, was Vittorio Caruso. His hands were tied behind his back. His expensive suit was stained. His face was swollen on one side from Alessandro's strike. 2 guards held him in place. When Vittorio lifted his head, his eyes found Alessandro immediately. He tried to smile. Came out crooked. "You really hit hard for a grieving widower," Vittorio muttered. Alessandro didn't answer. He walked closer, slow and controlled. His calmness was worse than screaming. It meant he was thinking. Temperance's heart pounded as she watched him. There was something terrifying about the quiet. Alessandro stopped in front of Vittorio. "Who," he said, voice low, "helped you?" Vittorio gave a soft laugh. "You think I did everything alone?" he asked. Alessandro leaned in slightly. "I know you didn't," he replied. "So I'll ask again." Vittorio's smile faded. His eyes flicked around the room, searching for something. Protection. Loyalty. A way out. He found none. Alessandro straightened and nodded once. One of the guards stepped forward and grabbed Vittorio by the hair, forcing his head back. Temperance tensed, ready to look away. But Alessandro did not order violence. Not yet. He ordered truth. "Start talking," Alessandro said. "Or I will remove pieces of you until you do." Vittorio swallowed hard. His pride fought with his fear. His mouth opened, then closed again. Finally he spoke. "It's the Conti syndicate," Vittorio admitted, voice bitter. "They've been watching you for months." Alessandro's eyes narrowed. "Names?" Alessandro demanded. Vittorio hesitated, then breathed out through his nose like the words tasted disgusting. "They financed it," he said. "They paid for the first hit at the Onyx Crown. They paid the shooter. They wanted your son dead. Not you." Temperance felt sick. Alessandro's fists tightened. "And the gala?" Alessandro asked. Vittorio's gaze slid toward Temperance briefly. "That was mine," he said. "But it was also theirs. They wanted the girl gone. They wanted you unstable." Alessandro's voice dropped even lower. "The leak," he said. "Inside my circle." Vittorio's lips pressed together. "You already know," he muttered. Alessandro stared at him. Vittorio's eyes shifted to the side for a second, and that second was enough. Several men in the room stiffened. Temperance realized what Alessandro had realized. The betrayal was not just Vittorio. Vittorio had help. Someone else had fed him information. Someone else had opened doors. The inner circle was compromised. Alessandro turned his head slowly and scanned the room. His men held his gaze, some steady, some too still. Temperance's stomach tightened. This was the kind of moment where a wrong breath could get someone killed. Alessandro stepped back from Vittorio. "Take him," he ordered. 2 guards dragged Vittorio to his feet. Vittorio struggled, spitting blood. "You can't do this," he snapped. "I'm family." Alessandro's expression stayed cold. "You stopped being family when you tried to kill my children," he said. The guards pulled Vittorio away down a corridor. Temperance stood frozen, unsure what to do with her hands, her breath, her fear. Alessandro turned to her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Temperance shook her head quickly. "Just shaken," she admitted. Alessandro nodded once. Then he walked past her without another word. Temperance watched him go, realizing something important. He was not done. Not even close. Days passed. Then weeks. Temperance healed completely, but the memory of that night stayed in her body. She slept lightly now. Loud sounds made her flinch. Sometimes she woke up with her heart racing, seeing the loading dock and the black van in her mind. But she didn't break. She refused to break. True to his promise, Alessandro gave her work. Not busy work. Real work. He put her in charge of the De Luca Foundation. At first she thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. The foundation was the clean face of the De Luca empire. Scholarships. Food programs. Housing support. Medical assistance. And the moment Temperance sat in the foundation office for the first time, surrounded by staff who looked at her like she was a legend, she understood something. She had been pulled into Alessandro's world, but she could still build something good inside it. She worked hard. She learned fast. She stayed organized. She asked questions. She refused to sign anything that didn't make sense. And for the first time in years she had steady money. With her first official paycheck, she paid off her father's debts legally. Not with fear. Not with begging. With paperwork and receipts. She stared at the final confirmation email for a long time, tears burning her eyes. That debt had been a shadow over her family for years. Now it was gone. Meanwhile, the twins grew closer to her every day. Mateo began running to her whenever he saw her in the hallway, holding Turbo like it was a sacred object. Lucia followed quietly, always watching, always careful. They asked her to read to them at night. They asked her to help with puzzles. They pulled her into their games. Temperance didn't try to replace their mother. She didn't pretend. She simply showed up. And that was enough. The manor felt less cold because of it. Outside the gates, the world created its own story. The press did not know the details. They never did. But rumors spread quickly in Baltimore. A waitress took bullets meant for a crime king's child. A charity gala erupted into gunfire. A woman in red escaped a kidnapping attempt and returned screaming into a ballroom. The name attached to all of it was always the same. Temperance Whitlock. The media called her the angel of the underworld. She hated the title. She hated the attention. But it also meant something. It meant people were watching. And in Alessandro's world, being watched could be protection or a death sentence. Alessandro did not respond publicly. He did not make statements. He did not attend interviews. Instead, he moved quietly. He dismantled the Conti syndicate's financial network piece by piece. Bank accounts froze. Businesses collapsed. Partners disappeared. Supply lines broke. Money stopped flowing. No one on the outside could prove it was him. But inside the underworld they all understood. Alessandro De Luca was retaliating. Not loudly. Not emotionally. Strategically. Silently. Temperance noticed the change in him. He spoke less. He slept less. He walked with a heavier stillness. Sometimes she saw him through the window at night, standing outside with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a voice she could not hear. But she didn't need to hear it. She could feel what was happening. A war was being fought without headlines. A war made of quiet decisions, private threats, and careful moves. Temperance did not know how long it would last. She only knew one thing. The gala had exposed the enemy. And now Alessandro was closing his fist around them. Slowly. Completely. And when he was done, there would be nothing left to fight back. The war did not begin with explosions or headlines. It began with silence. Baltimore moved as it always did. Traffic lights blinking, harbor fog rolling in before dawn, businessmen shaking hands in polished offices. Nothing looked different from the outside. But beneath that calm surface, something was shifting. Alessandro De Luca had made his decision. He would not storm into the streets with gunfire. He would not shout revenge. He would erase his enemies quietly. The first move was money. Money built loyalty. Money funded violence. Money bought protection. Without it, even the loudest crime families became small. Alessandro called in favors that had been sitting unpaid for years. He leaned on bankers who owed him silence. He had auditors examine contracts that had never been examined before. The Conti syndicate's shell companies began to crumble. Shipping licenses were revoked. Construction permits were delayed. Investors pulled out after anonymous warnings. Insurance claims were denied for technical irregularities. From the outside it looked like bad luck. From the inside everyone understood. Alessandro was cutting off oxygen. Temperance noticed the difference in him. He moved like a man who had made peace with something dark. He spoke little during dinner. He took phone calls late at night. His study door stayed closed longer. One evening, she passed by the hallway outside his office and heard only a single sentence through the heavy wood. Make it permanent. Her chest tightened. She kept walking. The second move was personal. Carlo Iron Hand, Ricci had once been a small enforcer with big ambition. He had broken fingers, broken legs, and broken families in the name of profit. Years earlier, he had squeezed Temperance's father for money he could not repay. Now he was a liability to the Conti syndicate. Ricci operated out of a warehouse near the harbor. He believed he was safe. He had guards. He had weapons. He had the confidence of a man who thought the storm had already passed. He was wrong. One cold morning, Ricci did not arrive at his usual meeting. By afternoon, whispers moved through Baltimore's underworld. Ricci had been handled. No details. No bodies displayed. No public message. Just absence. His name stopped appearing in conversations. Temperance did not need to ask what had happened. She saw the answer in Alessandro's eyes that night when he came home. There was no satisfaction there. Only closure. The Pittsburgh Circle watched carefully. They had been blamed for the gala incident in Vittorio's original plan. The rumor had spread fast that Pittsburgh might have tried to provoke war. But Alessandro did not take the bait. He sent a message through a neutral intermediary. No threats. No accusations. Only one clear statement. We do not seek conflict. The Pittsburgh Circle responded the same way. Neutral. They understood power. They understood traps. They understood that someone had tried to light a fire between them. The tension dissolved slowly. Baltimore remained tense but contained. Vittorio Caruso never returned to the manor. His removal from power was not announced publicly. It did not need to be. His office was cleared. His access codes were revoked. His loyal men were reassigned or dismissed. His name stopped being spoken at the long dining table. In the criminal world, erasure was worse than death. Vittorio no longer existed within the DeLuca structure. The inner circle tightened. Security doubled. Information became restricted. Alessandro trusted fewer people now. Temperance could feel it. As the Conti syndicate weakened, a power vacuum formed in Baltimore. Small crews tried to claim abandoned territory. Independent operators began testing boundaries. Some thought Alessandro's focus on internal betrayal had left him distracted. They miscalculated. Every attempt to encroach was answered quietly but firmly. A warehouse changed ownership overnight. A distribution route shifted without warning. A meeting that should have happened never did. Balance returned. But it returned under one name. DeLuca. Temperance sat on the terrace one evening, wrapped in a coat, watching frost gather along the stone railing. Alessandro joined her without a word. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, staring out over the dark lawn. The house behind them was warm. The twins' laughter echoed faintly through the windows. You ended it, she said softly. Alessandro did not pretend to misunderstand. I ended their leverage, he replied. She turned toward him. Enrici? She asked quietly. Alessandro met her gaze. He will never hurt another family, he said. Temperance held his eyes. That doesn't answer my question. Silence stretched between them. Finally he spoke. In my world, he said calmly, problems don't go to court. Temperance's jaw tightened. And that makes it right? She asked. It makes it final, he answered. The cold air felt sharper. Temperance looked back at the house. I don't belong in this, she admitted. I run a foundation. I sign scholarship checks. I smile at children. And then I sit here knowing someone disappeared because of us. Alessandro's expression did not harden. It softened. Because of me, he corrected. She shook her head. No, she said. Because of what this world demands. Alessandro stepped closer. This world demands strength, he said. Weakness gets children killed. She flinched slightly at the reminder. I'm not asking you to like what I do, he continued. I'm asking you to understand why I do it. Temperance wrapped her coat tighter around herself. And if I can't? She asked. Alessandro's voice lowered. Then I will still do it, he said. Because family is everything. She looked up at him. Family, she repeated. My children, he said. The people inside those walls. You. The word landed heavier than the cold. Temperance's breath caught. You don't get to put me in that category so easily, she said, but her voice lacked sharpness. Alessandro stepped closer still. Close enough that she could feel his warmth against the winter air. You stood in front of bullets for them, he said. You built something clean inside this house. You question me when no one else dares to. That makes you family. Temperance searched his face. And what does that make me to you? She asked. Alessandro did not look away. It makes you necessary, he said. The honesty in his tone stunned her more than any romantic words could have. Necessary? She repeated. He nodded slowly. I built my empire on fear and control, he said. I believe that was enough. But after everything, after the betrayal, after seeing my children cry, I realized something. He reached out, brushing his fingers gently over her hand. I don't want to do this alone anymore. Temperance's heart pounded. You don't need me to run your war, she said quietly. No, he replied. I need you to remind me why I fight. Her throat tightened. And if I walk away? She asked. Alessandro's jaw flexed slightly. I won't stop you, he said. But I would feel it. The confession was not dramatic. It was simple. Real. Temperance looked at the frost on the railing, then back at the house glowing behind them. Inside those walls were two children who trusted her. A foundation that saved families. A man who lived in darkness but had shown her pieces of his heart. The war outside might have been quiet, but the war inside her was louder. She finally stepped closer, closing the small space between them. "I don't agree with everything you do," she said softly. "I know," he answered. "But I understand why," she added. Alessandro exhaled slowly, relief almost invisible in his posture. Temperance placed her hand over his. "Family," she said again, testing the word. He nodded. "Family," he repeated. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the last traces of a fading conflict. The Conti syndicate was broken. The power structure had shifted. Baltimore had chosen its balance. And in the quiet that followed war, two people stood together, knowing that peace in their world was never permanent. But for now it was enough. Winter settled over DeLuca Manor like a thick blanket. The lawns that had once been green were now pale and stiff. Bare branches scratched at the gray sky. Frost clung to the iron gates each morning, and the air smelled clean, cold, and sharp. Inside the manor, warmth lived in the fireplaces and the lights. The house was still guarded, still watched, still protected. But the feeling inside had changed. The constant tension that once filled every hallway had eased. Peace had returned, at least the kind of peace their world allowed. Temperance Whitlock stood by the window in the great hall, holding a mug of hot cocoa. She watched snow fall softly outside, landing on the stone steps and the dark hedges. It was quiet enough that she could hear the gentle crackle of the fire behind her. A small scream of laughter broke the silence. "Temperance, look." Matteo ran past her, carrying a strand of colorful decorations almost as long as he was tall. Lucia followed him, holding a small box of ornaments with both hands, moving carefully so she wouldn't drop anything. A Christmas tree stood in the center of the great hall. It was enormous, nearly touching the ceiling. Its branches were thick and full, carrying the scent of pine through the room. But the ornaments hanging on it were not the kind Temperance expected in a rich house like this. They were messy. They were handmade. They were real. Paper stars with uneven edges. A macaroni angel painted gold. A small ornament shaped like a superhero cape. A cardboard heart with someone's shaky writing on it. Temperance smiled as she watched the twins work. They were serious about it too, like decorating the tree was the most important mission in the world. "You're putting that one too low," Matteo told Lucia with a frown. "It's not low," Lucia argued quietly. "It's where I can see it." Matteo huffed. "Daddy will want it higher." Temperance stepped closer and crouched beside them. "Here," she said gently. "Matteo, you can hang yours higher. Lucia, you can hang yours where you like. That way the tree belongs to both of you." Matteo thought about it, then nodded like she had offered a genius solution. Lucia gave Temperance a small, grateful look. Temperance stood again and stepped back, watching them. Their faces were brighter now than they had been at the beginning of all this. Their laughter came easier. Their eyes didn't flick toward doors every few seconds like they used to. They still lived in a guarded world, but they had stopped living in fear. And Temperance knew why. The Conti syndicate had been dismantled. Not through speeches. Not through public announcements. It happened quietly, steadily, like a rope tightening until it snapped. One by one, the Conti connections vanished. Their money streams dried. Their partners abandoned them. Their influence shrank. People who once moved confidently in Baltimore's shadows now stayed hidden. The threat that had hovered over DeLuca Manor like a storm cloud had finally cleared. And Vittorio Caruso was gone. Temperance did not know exactly where he went. She didn't ask. She didn't need the details. She only knew he was no longer part of this house, no longer part of Alessandro's power. His name was not spoken. His space had been erased. That was enough. The manor breathed differently without him. The DeLuca Foundation was thriving. Temperance had poured herself into it with everything she had. She worked long hours, built new programs, tightened budgets, demanded transparency, and refused waste. She wasn't just signing papers anymore. She was shaping lives. Families got food deliveries. Children got scholarships. A clinic received funding for free medical care. And for the first time since her mother died, Temperance felt something close to stability. She still had scars. She still had memories that haunted her. But she also had purpose. The foundation gave her that. And strangely so did this house. Because while she had come here as a wounded stranger, she now moved through the halls like someone who belonged. Not as a servant. Not as a prisoner. As herself. That evening, the manor glowed with Christmas lights. Not extravagant ones. not showy ones. Simple strings of warm light hung around the staircase, along the fireplace mantel and across the tall windows. The twins finished decorating the tree and stepped back proudly. "It's perfect," Mateo announced. Lucia nodded, her eyes shining. Temperance laughed softly. "It's beautiful," she agreed. Then she noticed a quiet shift in the room. The guards at the far end of the hall stepped aside. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned. Alessandro De Luca had entered. He wasn't wearing his suit. That alone made Temperance pause. Instead, he wore a dark sweater and simple trousers. His hair was slightly unstyled, as if he had chosen comfort over image. It made him look less like a king and more like a man. But his eyes still carried power. They moved over the tree, the handmade ornaments, the twins' proud faces. Something softened in his expression. Mateo ran toward him immediately. "Daddy, look at the tree," he cried. Lucia followed, quieter but excited. Alessandro crouched, letting them speak over each other as they pointed out every ornament. Temperance stood a few steps away watching. For a moment she felt like she was looking at a different Alessandro. One who didn't live with a weapon in his hand. One who wasn't surrounded by betrayal. One who could just be a father. When the twins finally ran off toward the dining area, arguing loudly about cake, Alessandro stood and walked toward Temperance. He held 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He offered one to her. Temperance took it, her fingers brushing his briefly. "Thank you," she murmured. Alessandro nodded once, then gestured toward the fire. "Sit," he said. Temperance sat on the rug near the fireplace, not on the expensive sofa. She didn't even think about it. It felt natural now. Alessandro sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The fire crackled. The Christmas lights glowed. Outside, snow fell softly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alessandro reached into his pocket. Temperance's heart tightened instantly. He pulled out a small box. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't new. The box looked worn, like it had been kept safe for a long time. Temperance stared at it. "Alessandro," she whispered, unsure. He opened it. Inside was a sapphire ring, deep blue like midnight, surrounded by small diamonds. It wasn't oversized. It wasn't loud. It was elegant and timeless. Temperance's breath caught. The twins noticed instantly. Mateo appeared again, eyes wide. "He's doing it," Mateo shouted. Lucia covered her mouth with her hands, smiling. Temperance felt her eyes sting with sudden tears. Alessandro turned toward her fully. His voice was steady, but something in it was different, thicker, more human. "You saved my children," he said. "You saved my life." Temperance swallowed hard. He continued. "You walked into darkness and still carried light," he said quietly. "You didn't beg for comfort. You didn't ask for gifts. You asked for work. You asked to earn your place." Temperance stared at him, unable to speak. Alessandro took her hand gently. "I don't need someone who is impressed by me," he said. "I need someone who sees me clearly." His eyes held hers, intense but warm. "I need you," he confessed. "Not as a symbol. Not as a story. Not as the angel people whisper about." He paused briefly, then spoke the words that made the room feel like it stopped breathing. "Temperance Whitlock, will you marry me?" Lucia gasped. Mateo whispered loudly, "Say yes." Temperance laughed through her tears. Came out shaky and real. She looked at the ring. Then she looked at Alessandro's face, the man who lived in violence but had shown her honesty, the man who trusted her in a house full of betrayal. Then she looked at the twins, watching her like their whole world depended on her answer. Temperance squeezed Alessandro's hand. "Ask me again," she teased softly, voice trembling. Alessandro let out a quiet laugh, one that sounded like relief. "Will you marry me?" he asked again. Temperance nodded, tears spilling freely now. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Mateo threw his hands up like he had won a prize. Lucia clapped softly, smiling so wide her cheeks lifted. Alessandro slid the ring onto Temperance's finger. Then he leaned in and kissed her, slow, firm, and full of something stronger than fear. When he pulled back, the twins were still staring. Mateo grinned wildly. "Finally," he announced, "can we eat cake now?" Temperance laughed against Alessandro's shoulder. "Yes," she said, wiping her tears. "We can eat cake." Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, the fire burned warm. And for the first time in a long time, the De Luca Manor felt like a home. January arrived with clean air and pale skies. The kind of winter that made Baltimore look almost innocent. Snow fell in soft layers over rooftops, over sidewalks, over the harbor water that moved slowly like dark glass. The city still carried its old grime underneath, but the white cover made everything look calm from a distance. People loved that illusion. Temperance Whitlock understood illusions better than most now. She had lived in a world where fine suits hid violence, where charity events hid traps, where smiles hid knives. But as the new year began, she noticed something strange. The world outside the gates was changing the story. Not quietly, publicly. The newspapers that once ran vague headlines about crime and corruption now leaned into something more dramatic. Online posts spread faster than print ever could. Names that had once been whispered were now spoken openly by people who had never stepped into a back alley or heard a gunshot. And at the center of that shifting narrative was one name repeated like a legend. Temperance Whitlock. The press did not know everything, but they never needed to. They only needed the shape of the story. A broke waitress took bullets meant for a powerful man's children. A gala turned into chaos. A traitor fell. A woman rose. And now, the same woman was appearing at charity meetings and public events as the official leader of one of the city's biggest foundations. The story had moved from fear to fascination. Temperance's face appeared in articles beside words like resilience, courage, and unexpected hero. Her name was attached to headlines about school programs, winter food drives, and medical grants. People stopped calling her the waitress. They started calling her the woman who rebuilt lives. Temperance didn't enjoy attention. It made her uncomfortable. It made her feel exposed. But she understood something important about being seen. Being seen could protect you. If too many people watched her, it became harder for the wrong people to erase her. So she stepped into the role fully. She became publicly recognized as the DeLuca Foundation's leader. Not as a figurehead. As the person in charge. She attended meetings in simple suits and warm coats. She spoke calmly, clearly, without trying to sound impressive. She asked direct questions. She demanded proof and reports. She made sure money went where it was meant to go. Some people whispered behind her back at first. They doubted her because she didn't come from their world. But she earned respect the only way that mattered. Through results. Children received school supplies. Families got heating support. A small clinic stayed open because the foundation covered emergency costs. Temperance watched those changes happen and felt something settle in her chest. Not pride. Relief. Her life had been torn apart by loss and violence, but she was building something that saved others from falling the way she had fallen. That mattered more than headlines. Meanwhile, the underworld grew unusually quiet. Not silent, but steady. The streets still had secrets. The harbor still had deals. Men still moved in shadows. But the chaos that had threatened to rip Baltimore apart faded like smoke. Territories remained stable. No crews openly challenged Alessandro DeLuca. No rival family made bold moves. No sudden wars erupted for control. The Conti syndicate was dismantled. Their networks were broken. Their influence was weakened beyond repair. The underworld understood what had happened, even if the public didn't. It wasn't a victory parade. It was a warning. Alessandro had survived. And he had chosen control over chaos. That alone made him more dangerous than any loud criminal king. He was stable in power now. Not because he was feared alone, but because he was respected. Even enemies preferred predictability over unpredictable violence. Alessandro provided that. He kept the balance sharp and clean. Anyone who tried to disrupt it quickly learned the city had rules, and those rules had consequences. Temperance noticed the difference inside the manor too. Security remained tight, but it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like protection. The twins ran freely through halls again. They laughed more. They fought over silly things like toys and cake and who got to hang the next ornament in the New Year's decoration box. And Alessandro moved with a calm she hadn't seen before. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. His eyes still watched everything, but the constant edge of panic was gone. He no longer looked like a man waiting for betrayal at every turn. He looked like a man who had faced betrayal and survived it. One evening, after a long day of foundation meetings, Temperance returned to the manor and found Alessandro standing near the wide living room window. Snow drifted outside, falling steadily. The fire was lit. The house was quiet. The twins were already asleep upstairs. Temperance stepped into the room without speaking, removing her gloves slowly. She watched Alessandro for a moment. He didn't notice her at first. His gaze was fixed on the snow, but his mind was clearly somewhere else. Temperance approached and stood beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Alessandro's eyes remained forward. "That night," he said. Temperance's throat tightened slightly. She didn't need him to explain which night. The bullet night. The onyx crown. The mirrored reflection. The gun aimed at a child. Temperance looked down at her shoulder for a moment. The scar was faint now, but it still existed. A line of history etched into her skin. I see it sometimes, she admitted. In my head. Alessandro finally turned his head slightly toward her. I hear your voice, he said quietly. When you screamed. Temperance swallowed. Alessandro's expression remained controlled, but his voice had softened. I had men, he said. I had security. I had power. And still I didn't see it in time. Temperance looked at him. You're blaming yourself, she said. Alessandro's jaw flexed slightly. I don't like owing anyone my children's lives, he replied. Temperance reached out and placed her hand gently over his. You don't owe me, she said. I chose it. Alessandro held her gaze. Why? He asked quietly, like he still couldn't accept it. Temperance thought for a moment. Snow fell in the background like a slow curtain. Because they were children, she said simply. And because I was standing there. Alessandro stared at her like those words were the most powerful thing he'd ever heard. Then he exhaled slowly. You gave me something I didn't have, he said. Temperance frowned slightly. What? Alessandro's eyes stayed on hers. A reason to want peace, he admitted. Temperance felt her chest tighten. You always wanted peace, she said softly. Alessandro shook his head once. No, he replied. I wanted control. Peace is different. Temperance didn't argue. She understood the difference now too. Control meant surviving. Peace meant living. Outside, the snow continued to fall over Baltimore, covering streets and rooftops and alleyways. It softened the city's rough edges for a while. Not forever. But long enough to breathe. Temperance leaned her head lightly against Alessandro's shoulder. People tell stories, she said quietly. They think they know everything. Alessandro's mouth twitched faintly. They know nothing, he said. Temperance let out a soft breath that almost sounded like a laugh. They say I'm an angel, she murmured. Alessandro's gaze softened. You are, he said. Temperance turned her head to look at him. And they call you a king, she continued. He looked out again. I am, he said, not proud, just honest. Temperance nodded slowly. Then she spoke the truth of what she had learned. An angel doesn't survive without wings, she said. And a king doesn't stay standing without a heart. Alessandro's hand tightened gently around hers. Outside, Baltimore stayed quiet. Inside, the fire burned warm. Temperance looked at the snowfall and felt something settle inside her. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. Not perfect safety. Not guaranteed safety. But a fragile peace that had been earned through fire, through pain, through choices that couldn't be undone. She thought about the girl she had been, running late to work, counting coins, drowning in grief. She thought about the moment she saw the gun and moved without thinking. That split second had changed everything. Now she was not invisible anymore. She had a name people recognized. A purpose. A family. A future. The angel had found wings. The king had found a heart. And Baltimore for now had found peace, built through fire and guarded by love. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.